I think we're short on time, so I'll start right away. Are you guys still awake? Yes, 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 yes. Do I hear yes? Yes. Everyone's hands up and yes? Yes, hands up. Yes, we're still awake. So today I will talk to you about growing your engineering culture, and it's a topic that is, I think, very interesting. We're very late in the day, so I will try to make it. I know how entertaining your TV is in Romania, but in Germany it's not very entertaining. So I wanted to tell you something, like to sit back and relax and look at it like TV, but I hope it's going to be better than that. So the agenda that I'm going to talk through is very sort of like short, and it has like 3 pieces. The first piece is an overview of GetYourGuide. That's the company that I co-founded and where I sort of like basically have all my experience from. The second one is about scaling the engineering organization and scaling the engineering culture. And the third piece is sort of like about how you can actually make this culture sustainable. And the way how I set up this presentation when I thought about sort of like coming to Cluj and talking to you guys is sort of like that I try to show you the way of how we grew our business and our engineering organization, our engineering culture from a bunch of people in the garage to more than 100 people now building the product, and sort of like all of that in just a short period of time. So my journey personally started in Switzerland in 2008, and like many of you guys, I was an engineer. I was working in biochemistry and neurobiology and computer science, working on large amounts of data sets. And together with my friends from university, I had this crazy idea. And our idea was that we wanted to connect local students with other local students traveling in sort of a peer-to-peer network, which was in 2008 totally revolutionary. So this was 2 years before Airbnb. And what we thought was, what about sort of what about we make traveling a better experience by allowing local students to become tour guides for other people. So literally what we thought of was let's create sort of like a hybrid between Facebook, eBay, and a travel website basically. That was the idea. So local students become tour guides. This was the initial company, all engineers. This is my living room, which was also part of our office, our first Christmas party in 2008. And this was our first website. You see sort of like a tour guide and a traveler, and sort of like it was like a peer-to-peer thing. And again, sort of like remember, Brian Chesky and the guys from Airbnb were far away. We actually also thought, by the way, this is a little side story, back then we thought about adding accommodation to it. So sort of like allowing people to rent out their rooms, but we decided against it because we thought that couchsurfing had already taken the market, which didn't prove to be true. But anyway, I should also give you a little spice that sometimes you also miss great opportunities in order to find other great opportunities. So what we came up with, however, was that very few people actually wanted to be local tour guides. So so like while we built this great website and scaled it for 2 years, no one signed up, and even worse, no one booked. And so like between 2008 to 2010, we had an aggregate of, I think, 4 bookings, out of which 2 were my mom. So it was very depressing. So what I decided to do was, I went out and I applied for a bunch of jobs. I was looking at Google and I was looking at, a couple of consulting gigs. I actually got accepted, and 3 months into the, so like working for the first company, I was actually really frustrated because I knew that the thing that I really, really loved was actually doing something by myself and was actually pursuing this fantastic project. So what we did is actually on a summer retreat with the other co-founders, so with the people that you saw at this little Christmas party, we sat together and sort of like looked at the market one more time, and we thought, hey, there's got to be something in this market because travel experiences for the large part still suck. You can book flights, you can book hotels on the internet, but what you can do in a destination when you travel to London, when you travel to Paris, when you travel to Berlin is not really well organized. So what we came up with was the business plan for what later would become GetYourGuide today. And that is the largest platform for sightseeing, tours, attractions, activities, museum tickets, so anything you do locally. Because what we realized, and ping me on drinks later on, sort of like on the sort of like entire story, that's sort of like an hour in itself, but what we realized, sort of like just to make it very short, is that while none of the students actually wanted to be tour guides and wanted to show people around the city, there were actually a lot of small local businesses that had written us emails and sort of like pinged us and tried to market their business on our website. So again, I think this ties perfectly into what Rohan said in the previous presentation, which I think actually sort of like was really, really great, and I will sort of like in a minute from now really tie into this presentation. But what sort of like what we learned, sort of like lesson number one, try to listen to your customers or your potential customers. And I think what we found in the early stages of our product is that we were actually focusing on one customer group while another customer group, so we were focusing on students, while actually professional vendors of attractions, activities and sightseeing tours, which is a huge market in itself, were actually our real customer group. So we pivoted the business into this big market. Later, so like, this is what we did on a napkin back then. Later, professional research organizations, as we grew, so like came and so like estimated the market. It's a $100 billion market globally. A very big part of it is done in Europe. So just think of all the attractions and sightseeing tours and museums that you find in Paris, London, Rome, Brussels, Barcelona, Madrid, etc. So it's a very, very big market. And what we also figured out, and I think that's another really important thing in the early stages of the startup, is that it's a very broken market. So I think what we heard a lot today, was sort of like think about how you can market your product, how you can bring it to market, how you can define the product. So like like whenever an entrepreneur pitches me, I have one single question to him, and that is, how big is the pain for your consumers? And if the pain is really big, that's typically my answer. If the pain is really, the bigger the pain is, to formulate it very radically, the bigger the pain, the bigger your gross margin. It's the iron rule of business. Big pain, big gross margin. So what we saw in our model was as well that the consumer pain of actually finding the right thing to do in a destination was really big. And it was a very intransparent market. So so just picture yourself. I don't know if you've traveled to one of the bigger European capitals in the past couple of months. If you stayed at a hotel, you will find that there are lots of little brochures that are next to the hotel concierge desk, or there are people, vendors on the street that sell you stuff, typically for overpriced prices and with big commission margins, and it's a very sort of like bad product experience. And a lot of people actually, there's even so like whenever I tell what I do, people typically come to me and it's like, do you also work with the little Luigis, the tour guides on the street? So despite the fact that most of the sightseeing tour businesses in the world are actually really reputable, nice family businesses that have been there for like decades, sometimes 10 years, 20 years, the market reputation is really bad, and there's a big gap between finding the right things and transacting and buying something, as opposed to what the real great inventory is that there is out there. So what we did at GetYourGuide then was, we really came up with the transaction system basically. So we basically built the distribution system in this space from scratch. So so like going back to like these little students, when we dropped out of school and I quit my job, the first thing what we did was, and this is sort of like where it gets interesting for you guys, is actually we built software. We didn't have a single marketing guy, we didn't have a single sales guy, we didn't have anyone except for engineers. And we actually sat down and built a piece of software that would allow the vendors, so the professional sightseeing tour operators, like the Madame Tussauds or the Eiffel Tower, or like the bus tour or the river cruise, to come online, set up their inventory, define availabilities and pricing, and then load their inventory online. And we did that. I actually did most of the sales myself, because the other engineers felt like that was a stupid job to do, and so they figured out who's the worst engineer out of the group. They picked me, and I had to do the sales. And so like I called up all these merchants initially, which is fantastic. And for I would say at least a year, we scaled this system where we had a piece of software that we gave to local attractions. They signed up, they created the content, we started to sell it online. Just within the group of the 5 of us, and it worked really great. And so like the sales started ramping up, and we started to create a real business. And fast forward 4 years, we have tens of thousands of things to do in different categories all around the world, and are the leader in our vertical. Now let's get to the fun part. Whenever people ask me what the challenging thing about GetYourGuide is, and as we're still growing, I just have one single answer, and that is the engineering part. Because to me, marketing and PR and everything else is just a function of your product at the end of the day. If you have truly the most amazing product, that consumers like it. If you really focus on the consumer, you will do great, and then PR will be easy, and marketing will be a piece of cake for you. But scaling engineering and scaling the product part and doing that well is really all that matters at the end of the day, in my opinion. I'm happy to debate that if you don't believe so. But let me show you how we did that, and it's like also the failures, I guess, that we went through and that we corrected over time. So stage one, this is what I love. This is the most exciting stage, and I think probably most of you that have started a business or are about to start a business, so like are in that stage, and everyone who scaled the business has gone through that stage. Stage one is what I call the everyone and everything. So stage one was the phase when I was doing the sales, because they kicked me out of the front-end engineering because I had too many JavaScript bugs when I was coding, and so this was when we literally everyone was working full stack on any piece of the software. And the great thing about that was we all had comprehensive knowledge, so we could all work on every single module, every single detail of the page. And looking back, what we did was just amazing. We wrote the entire supplier and merchant system. We wrote the entire consumer website. We wrote the entire partner and distribution system. I mean, software development was just so easy. We kept on kicking, and like every second day we had a new release. And I can still remember, sitting there with the 5 guys, and so like after a year, and seeing all the software that was popping up, and it's like, how can these big organizations like Facebook or Microsoft, employ thousands of engineers and still only change so little things on their websites? A couple of years later, I'm one of those same people that fight for these little changes. But this was like a really exciting stage, and any entrepreneur always advised, as long as you can keep that alive, keep it alive, because this is your most productive stage in terms of building new product and not being constrained. However, the problem with that is, as the code base grew, and the bigger you get, suddenly there is one there's this law where suddenly you can't keep up with it anymore. You need to hire more people because you need to specialize, and the code just grows too complex, and it's really hard to keep up. So at one point we were just like, okay, we've got to hire more people because we can't handle it anymore, and our speed is going down. So the next stage was a very interesting stage, and we lived through it for, I would say, 1.5 years or so. And that stage, to summarize it, was basically what we call the stage of the laundry list. So we had a really long product laundry list with basically 1 or 2 product managers. We would write all the different features and all the different specs and that we wanted to develop. And then we had functional organizations underneath, like a front-end team and a back-end team and a QA team that would basically work off this laundry list. So we would throw in new stuff and then have bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger engineering teams that would just try to work on this list, and the list grew longer and bigger and bigger. So it's still very productive, but towards the end of that, it was actually becoming very unsustainable, and I tell you why. The key reason is that when you start developing in purely functional teams, and this is actually how still a lot of software organizations work today, you will at one point or another become so unproductive because it basically is very hard to have a consistent strategy in a pure functional organization. You're just working off this very long list of stuff, and who decides what gets on top of this list? Who decides what the strategy is behind putting things on this list? It's a very difficult problem in most startups, and we actually almost hit the wall back then because we were just developing one feature here, one bug fix there. It was basically just a pain-driven development at the end of the day. And this is when we actually decided that we have to have new initiatives, we have to come up with a clear product strategy, and we have to actually organize our an engineering organization around what actually makes sense for our product, and not for the hippos that we just heard about. So it's not about pains in the organization, but it's actually about strategy and about solving problems for our consumers. And this is literally when we came up with the 3rd stage, and this is how we're still organized today. And this is, I think, currently the state of the art. What we see and what we also feel in terms of software organizations, and that is a purely mission and strategy-driven development organization. And what I mean by that is, I just took the example of GetYourGuide. I'm very, very open and very transparent with you guys here. That those are our objectives that we currently have this year. So we want to improve discovery for the consumer. We want to optimize the conversion funnel. We want to work on our mobile apps, and we always have scalability problems that we want to solve. And this is also exactly how we created our mission-oriented teams in terms of where we put the engineering. And then we put in each of these teams, we have separate product managers, we have separate designers, we have separate front-end people, and we have separate back-end people. And to go back to what Roman just described, this is also a fantastic way to actually solve the hippo problem. As he just described, which actually, by the way, in stage 2, in the laundry list stage, was a huge problem because the hippos always decide what's on number 1 of the list. So this is actually when we also move to a purely test-driven development, because one thing that happens when you break up your organization according to your strategy is that you need to have KPIs and objectives for all of these separate teams. And that is the very scary moment for the senior management when you lose control. This is when there's no more product roadmap that's defined by the C-level team for the next 2 years. This is actually when KPIs and data take over and the teams actually run themselves after the objective. And for us, this is the scariest moment of the company because suddenly, I wasn't in control of what's being developed anymore, but also the biggest productivity jump that we've ever seen. And since we've started to do this 10 months ago, I can't provide any figures, but the increases in conversion rate, customer satisfaction, all the metrics have been through the roof since then. And we are much more in tune as an organization in terms of satisfaction also internally of the engineers with the product development and the progress of the product. And just to give you an example without hinting too much, I just saw this morning I took a screenshot from one of our product details pages. Those are the tickets to the Shard in London. That's a big attraction in London. On this very day, there were 5 experiments just in the top fold running, and that was the picture of the Shard and the symmetry of that picture, how many pictures we have underneath, whether it's 3 or 5 or 7, the pricing that we have, do we have a couple of digits with the pennies, or do we round that up or down, the way how we display consumer reviews. If you go on the website, you'll see a lot of different variations that are running through. And there's no more product roadmap. What we actually decide is on just based on the data, what the outcome of these experiments are. And whenever we find something, then we dig in. So this is the test-driven development and stuff how we scaled the organization. And maybe looking back, just one more thing on that. If I could have gone back in time, one of the errors that I would eradicate is that I would have switched to that organization earlier on. I think you cannot do it on day 1, so you have to go through the stage 1 where you all sit together, which is also great in a way, but then I think I would go to the mission-oriented strategic organization quicker than we did. It actually took us 2 years. I hope as you guys start to scale, it takes you less time than that because it's very painful. Now, last but not least, I want to focus on how you can make that sustainable. This is something that we're currently thinking about quite a lot, and we're thinking about culture and our values in the engineering organization quite a lot. So I'm a big fan of, everyone tells you what to do. I'm a big fan of don'ts, things that we don't do. And so the first thing, I'm very allergic to these BS culture talks and all these HR things that come up. And I always preach to my people, our culture is not, we have pizza and beer events, but that's not our culture. And it's a great appreciated item. Every Friday night we do a pizza and beer event, with great external speaker, but that doesn't have anything to do with our culture. That's basically a feature of our culture. Hackathons, extremely important. We do that very regularly, but hackathons are not culture. It's basically a feature that is on top, sits on top, a very important feature that sits on top of it and should be or can be an outcome of your culture. It's also not English class, it's not yoga teachers, it's definitely not having an office talk. And just to give you an example of our values and what's important to our engineering organization. Our engineering organization actually, this is very distinct stuff, and we have lots of lists that describe how these values actually map to how we work every day together. But one thing that's really important to us is passion. So we actually don't, a lot of people sort of say they're passionate, but so like, our engineering interviews, for instance, would, just to illustrate it, would feature questions like this, like, what, great travel, things to do have you done in sort of like the past 12 or 24 months? So like, are you really passionate about that product, And we meet a lot of great talented engineers that, to kind of like build the next generation of our iOS app, but if they're not passionate about travel, that's a no-go for us and we wouldn't hire that person. Or, another one is sort of like commitment towards each other and commitment towards the product. This is also something that's really important to us. Learning, we want, it's like one of the key characteristics that we want to see in every of our engineers and product managers and designers is that they've proven consistently, and they keep on proving within our organization that they are willing to learn and that they are willing to improve on themselves. Clarity is a really important one to us. Like, we want to be clear in terms of feedback towards each other. And positivity is one that is really important to us. We actually, we keep on smiling. We're not sort of like a sad organization. We try to, and we try to actually have fun at work, which is, I guess sort of like, some people would say not special, but given my experiences as being employed, it's actually something that doesn't happen every day. So we want to keep it positive and fun. So these are things that, might sound generic. So like if I say it in a general presentation, but those are things that really map towards who we are. And every of our employees could actually identify with these values, and we try to talk about them, and we try to, actually find things that illustrate them as often as possible, and would high-five each other whenever we see something like that. And this might sound silly to you, but this is a very important ingredient to us to keep our cultural identity and keep our values in sync, because values are literally the fundament that you build the entire organization later upon. And there's no successful testing, and there's no successful mission, there's no successful KPI if you don't have these values in place in the group setting. Our key mission, and that's what I want to leave you with, is literally that we really want to make the consumers enjoy the fun part of the trip. And what I would really encourage you today is, think about what your mission is. Think about what your organization. We really want to make the consumers enjoy the fun part of the trip. And what I would really encourage you today is, think about what your mission is. Think about what your organization's mission is. What do you want to do for the consumer? Because I think the one thing that I've learned along the journey is that the truly successful companies are the ones that focus on the consumer most. And if you can find that something that really enlightens you and enlightens the consumers and enlightens your organization, this is actually the piece and this is the mission that's going to make you successful. So with that, I want to leave you and I want to thank you for your time.
So I might apply soon. No, I don't. But I heard that Raj shared with me that you have a very special offer for everybody.
So we started. This is actually this was inspired by Bagelverse today. And so I was sitting, Eva, who's our head of HR, and I were sitting here today, and we were looking at your presentation. We thought, this is so inspiring to us. We're a travel company, so we reacted to that immediately. And we're currently hiring a lot of software engineers. We're really scaling our organization very fast. We have an intake of more than 10 people a month in software and engineering currently. So what we decided to do is a little fun challenge. And what we thought about is for those guys, it was so important to get to Silicon Valley. So GetYourGuide currently, and we thought we tie these incentives, of our objectives, hiring more engineers with, the need to come to Silicon Valley. And what we thought about is the following. And can you put on my slideshow once again? Is that possible?
Yeah, I guess so.
So there's one more thing that I wanted to announce. Wait, here you go. So we don't have a single Romanian developer yet in our organization. The person that references us, the first Romanian developer, or actually if you self-apply, this package goes to you, we will sponsor flights to San Francisco to an Airbnb. Our partners from Airbnb, I just messaged them quickly, also actually agreed to do that, an Airbnb for a full week in San Francisco, a GetYourGuide sightseeing tour package, and I also messaged our VCs at Spark Capital who have an office in San Francisco that you can also go and have a meeting with them. So if you sort of like know any talented engineers that want to join our engineering organizations, please tweet us or write at GetYourGuide, and we will give out that and we will grant that package to you for the referral or for the application. So this is the final thing, and thank you very much for inspiring this.